between my cervical spine and the tree. Ironically, it was shaped like a Maltese cross and spread out. I wish I would have kept that, but my kids kept saying, Dad, we actually are glad that you're here. We don't need the bullet. So, 3 in the morning, that's a general, right? He was out there all the way from Algiers, from his headquarters. That was a long drive. He left about 4 in the morning, having no idea that the German tanks were 2 hours behind him. He would find out days later when he went all the way back to his headquarters. You know what Rommel's famous saying was? In the absence of orders, find something and kill it. One of the finest generals, certainly of the century, had so much in common with Patton. Obviously, they both led for the front. He had been there in North Africa over 2 years. He actually moved into North Africa the same day we were federalized, February 7th, 1941. He had been turning to Africa with very little in the way of support. Hitler gave him nothing. Supplies, tanks, gas. They were always, if you read anything he wrote, especially to his wife, they were always just trying to stretch a gallon as far as they could. Nevertheless, finest fighting force in the world, the African Corps. That's who we had to face. So this is the Faid Pass. It's called the dorsals, the mountain ridges. 10th Armored Division came through this way. That's the hit, right? Now from down here, that was the 21st Panzer Division. These were the 2 toughest, most battle-hardened divisions in the German army, certainly in North Africa. But, I mean, you know, there were 300 or 400 of us with M1903 Springfield bolt-action rifles, so what could go wrong, right? It's an absolute bloodbath. My entire regiment, 85% were killed or captured within 36 hours. It's inconceivable what was going on. We're up here in these little things, hanging out like sore thumbs, and German idiots, everything's coming in. Mortars, machine gun fire, artillery, every Stupens were shredding us from above. Everything was being thrown at us. We were stunned. We had no idea what to do. This is my friend Russ Finney, played clarinet with me in high school band. Went out to get another box of ammunition because we were totally out, wasting it. I mean, we're shooting at these tiger tanks with our bolt-action rifles. We saw him. This about where that bench is over there, where the gentleman is sitting. He was standing there 1 second. 88 came in. There was nothing left. The crater, he was vaporized. They never found a single part of his body. We went to the cemetery in Algiers. We found a star on the wall because they didn't have anything, so we gave him a star on the wall. That's when it really comes home to roost. When one of your best friends from high school is there 1 second and not there the next. I mean, your mind just cannot deal with things. This is the first time I've seen combat. And okay, we started at the top. You want to experience combat? Here you go. The 10th and the 21st Panzers. Because I'd been shot, it wasn't a bad wound. It looked bad, it was bleeding. My jacket was torn up, so the fellow said, you need to go to the first aid station. So I went to the first aid station. And, you know, I'm feeling a bit sheepish because, you know, right beside me in the bed was an officer missing a leg. But we did our thing, rested. Meanwhile, you just hear the battle going on around us. And see dead Americans everywhere. After a few hours, we kind of were coming to. Someone came running in and said, they're gone. Like, what? They're gone. The entire battalion has left this mountain. Like, we're alone? You know, there were a dozen of us, maybe 18. with the entire German army, at this point, 300 yards away. We had 2 ambulances, couldn't get them running. Like, desperate people do desperate things, as my mother used to say. There was a grizzled old sergeant there that could hotwire cars. He said he was a mechanic. I think probably another occupation. With the speed that he did it, hotwired the ambulances, we jumped in and drove hell for leather, right back towards the American lines where we'd be safe. But when we got to the field hospital, for some reason, everything was written in German. Again, the mind's going, what is happening here? Well, their lines in the space of less than 12 hours had moved 30 miles. So what could you do then? You surrender, right? What can you do? My mom gets a telegram. Secretary of War, hi, how are you? We have no idea where your son is or if he's alive. So my mom used to talk about what it was like to get that telegram. Caught a few prisoners, as you can see. This line goes on for miles in both directions, taking us down to the coast. We sat at the beach and waited for the ships. At that point, planes. So, they flew us to Sicily in the famous Ju-52 Junkers. And we got on these very luxurious carriages, exactly like the one over there. Have you guys seen the Holocaust exhibit? Exactly, except that was a shake. So we went up Italy, blah, blah, blah. First camp was in Munich, Camp 7A, which my son's family has seen twice. They take this very nice picture for free, they don't charge for it. Excuse me. So there's an expert named Alfred who knows all the stuff that I'm desperately trying to remember. He's right over there by the ME 109. World War II. Oh, World War II veteran. Awesome. So go see him after. In fact, he might have more interesting things to say than I do. But they call me the Italian banana boy because of my blonde curly hair. I don't think any of them have ever seen an Italian banana boy. So again, what's the key thing in battle and in prison camp? What's the key? Morale. So, first thing we did, they gave us a missing hut. They said you can do with anything you want. So we put a library in the middle. We put a theater on one end and a sanctuary on the other end. Now you can't tell in this picture, but there are a lot of artisans there, especially French, and they did magnificent work. So, you could go into this church and it could look just like the one back home. That was a quality of the work. The one thing we were missing was a chaplain. Pretty important, right? In a prison camp where 10 people are dying a day, everyone's depressed. There was no chaplain. I was not a minister, but as you know, my granddad was a hillbilly preacher. So I knew a little bit about sermons. So I wrote my church back home. They sent me an exhorter's license. It's right there in that box. All this stuff is, where's the box? Oh, the box is down there, but I got a lot of stuff. Sure. This basically says you're not a minister. You've never been ordained. You probably shouldn't be doing this anyway, but, desperate people do desperate things. Here's your exhorter's license. So I was a chaplain of a camp that grew to over 1,500 POWs, Kriegies, the Germans called us. Kriegsgefangene. Everyday funerals. But we've lost a lot of our humanity. One thing we are not going to do is allow a U.S. soldier to die and not be treated with dignity and be given a proper burial. Not on our watch. It's not going to happen. Everyone got a proper funeral. proper burial with full military honors. Obviously, we couldn't do the 3-gun salute, but we could do just about everything else. So, average of 10 a day. You get a lot of time as a prisoner of war. So, what do? You write letters home. My daughter-in-law counted. These are the ones that I wrote home. 95 of them in here. And this is probably half. Fun things to read. These are going to be donated to the museum, so we can be taken proper care of. Some of the guys embarrassed me. An artist named Abe Rosefelder who did a drawing of me. And down here is a poem. Let's see, who wrote that? Oh, Frank Stebbing. We did a camp newspaper. I don't know how. Where did we get the paper and the ink? The printing press. That paper came out every week for 2 years, 2 months, and 9 days. Not that I was counting. All this was in the paper. It's amazing that it has survived this many years. What's the key word? Morale. And what boosts morale in prison camp more than anything else? Beating the guards at a sport. So we picked, obviously, the one they know the least of, baseball. We had games with the guards, and that's me right there. Back on the clarinet, my original instrument, which is our pep band. Every time we played any sport, we were out there supporting them. We did full-scale Broadway musicals, costumes, programs, music stands, lettered like they were on a Broadway stage. This was Showboat. I mean, look at those costumes. How did we make things like that? I have no idea. My family had trouble finding me. I finally told them it was probably because that was me. I was playing Julie. I was told I had very nice legs. You got a bunch of guys, you have to play every part, right? You can't have a musical with half the cast. So we put these things on. We had madrigal choirs, We had a swing band, every kind of musical ensemble you can imagine. Keep the spirits up. Don't let them get bored, right? That was why we spent so much time on this. The worst thing is not to be doing anything, right? Depression goes through the roof. We had lectures. You could get a college degree, actually. And one guy did it. Hard work. Keeping them busy. So this was the telegram that my mom liked better than the first one. Chaos at the end of the war. Western allies coming from the west, the Russians coming from the east. Germans, of course, were trying to get as far out of the way as the Russians, if they could, at least surrender to Americans. And the British, know that you won't be beheaded or sent to a gulag. 95% of German prisoners of war in Russia never came back. We never seen them. Staggering. They're marching us up and down these roads. We're passing other prisoners of war being marched the other direction. Total chaos. Meanwhile, we're getting strafed by our own aircraft because all they see is soldiers in uniform. I don't know who we are. But at that point, the guards, they were starting to think for themselves. Maybe if I take off this uniform and pretend I'm not the guard, I won't be beheaded or sent to a gulag. So discipline was becoming a bit more lax. Me and my buddy saw a chance. We saw a farm. We just took off. There was a barn. Went in the barn. There was a chicken. We had not eaten or had water for 3.5 days on a forced march. We were already pretty thin. This makes up for what I looked like in prison camp, which was a beanpole. There was a chicken. We were going to eat that chicken. Wrung its neck, took off the feathers, and ate it raw with our hands. And it was the best meal we'd ever had. Oh, I did feel very guilty about that all my life. Well, that's kind of the end of the story. In war, sometimes you're given medals. Are medals important? They absolutely are. But, you know, for the one who's been through it, you know, seeing his buddy Russ Finney vaporize, do not really have the same meaning. There are two of them that had a lot of meaning to me. Who knows what this is at the top? We've got some veterans out here. All of the Marines and Navy, so. Combat Infantryman's Badge, that's a Kentucky long rifle. They started giving that to infantrymen who did in battle because they didn't get paid much. So they said, oh, you can have an award. But it meant a lot to us. Because you know who did not have one of these? General Eisenhower. He had more fruit salad on his jacket. You could eat it for a week. Did not have one of these. He never carried a rifle in combat. So for infantrymen, that's a big deal. You know, skip the Purple Heart, skip the Bronze Star. Does anybody know what that medal is with the black in the center of the ribbon? That's a prisoner of war medal. Now, as you know, it's hard to explain any part of war to someone who's never been in war, which is why they come back and have PTSD and commit, I think we're up to 21 suicides a day today. Nobody can understand or relate. And even more so for prisoners of war. If you meet a fellow Kriegi, you know what he's been through. He knows what you've been through. After the battle, right? 2 years, 2 months, 9 days that I was counting. That's it. So that's the presentation. This is me after the war. I at least had the CIB and a few of my little medals there. But I hope that was of interest. We do have some time for questions. Can you believe exactly 44 minutes? We went through 50 slides in 44 minutes. How about that? My daughter-in-law would tell you usually I get through about 3 slides in 44 minutes. I like to talk, apparently. So, does anybody have any questions? Yes? Oh, that's a good question. What's a TB? I was telling one of our Marines over here. That stands for technical. It's a technical sergeant. It means you're not a real sergeant, but you have some kind of skill that they have to pay a little more for. I was playing the clarinet. I actually played the E-flat clarinet, which nobody else could do. I got an extra 25 cents a week. That's another quarter of my salary. $1? $1.25. It's awesome. Yes. You know, that's a great question. How the Germans treat us. On the one hand, really well. We were the first ground troops in the Western Theater. We were the first American prisoners they had. So, they wanted to show to the Red Cross what great care they were taking of us, right? So before the Red Cross came, they distributed us all blankets. It's cold. We were in Fürstenberg on the Oder, on the Polish border. And in winter, it was very cold with these little stoves. They're the size of this. If you made it lower, which all POWs did, either by hand, you could get it up to survival temperature. No blankets. We had blankets. The Red Cross came through. Great to see you guys. Red Cross left. Germans come around, pick up all the blankets. We know what others suffered in Germany and certainly in the Far East. Indescribable brutality. We did not have that. But we were always starving and sometimes dying and not very hopeful, right? Because when we went in, that was before Stalingrad, that was before Midway, that was before El Alamein, the turning points of the war. Germans were still in the ascendancy, and we were still the 18th largest army in the world after Albania.
How did you receive, it sounds like you were able to send letters, but how did you receive any information about what was happening with the war?
That's another great question. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have watched, are you old enough to have watched Hogan's Heroes, anyone? I actually hated it because they made sport of being in a prison camp, and it wasn't like that. But one thing that was real, almost all POWs somewhere had a radio. And do you know who we listened to? Going back to Churchill? BBC. They broadcast all over the world. And they told real news, not like the propaganda from Germany or Russia or any of those places. So that was our main source. Rumors, of course, which, like the rumor that we're going to take an island, if necessary by force, as if we were going to the South Pacific. Well, no, that was the Marines' territory. So the rumors, they're wild and stupid and ridiculous. But the BBC, spot on. They, sadly, they've moved a little bit away from this. But back then, if you heard it from the BBC, you could hang your hat on that. Sorry, I should have been repeating the questions. Have I written a book? That's a great question. Grandkids, have I written a book? Have I started a book? I've started a book. We've got a few chapters done. I'm not a writer, it's a terrible fear, like, is anybody really going to want to read this? But, you try to push past that, and that's still my bucket list. Advice to the younger generation. Well, someone like you're in the military and you're very proficient at what you do. You're excited about the country. We wish everyone was like you, basically. But what I do is things like this. I do this for scouts, flag retirement ceremonies. I do it for sixth graders every year. My granddaughter started this when she was in sixth grade. They know nothing. They don't even know about the Vietnam War, let alone World War II. So I try to keep the story going. I try to make it immediate for them, which is easy. All I have to do is say, I did this and I did that. And it's not like I have a lot of research into this. It's just what I remember, which is sometimes not all that much. When you get to my age, those things start to go. That's one thing that we can do is tell the story, get the story out. Encourage in every way you can. Places like this are phenomenal, right? You get to see this equipment, not just sitting here, but running. Do you know how rare that is? Do you guys know this is one of the finest armor collections on the planet? 6? Oh, new aircraft hangar coming up from Texas, right? The aircraft. Yes, I heard they were coming from Texas. Anyway, they're going to build a massive hangar, incredible aircraft collection. But this is just, if you go to a lot of museums, the only place I've seen anything close to this is in England. There's a place called Bovington. They actually have a tiger tank. Only museum in the world with a tiger tank. Let's see, we have time for let's see. What time is it? This is 9:10. Is it? Oh, we got some time. So we have some more time for questions. Yes, sir.
What was the time period between you being released and coming back home to see your mom?
Another good question. The time period between when I was released and when I actually made it back home, gosh, about 6 weeks. We had to go all the way across Europe, get on a ship in France, go across the ocean, land in New York, go across the country, because my mom was back in California by this time. But one thing you'll see in some letters in that book, I was basically still a teenager, really. And I never had a dad, practically speaking. So I sent a telegram to my mom at every single bus stop, from Sacramento down to Los Angeles, just because we were so incredibly excited. And I think the phrase I used was like, everything looks bright. I'm going to see here for the first time since March the 6th in 1941, right? Well, this is now, end of May in 1945. Gosh, I just could not wait for that. Others? Yes, sir.
Yeah, what was do you recall the Army group that liberated you folks?
Oh, the Russians? No idea whatsoever. All I know is they were in a mood to celebrate. Because
So
when
it
we...
was the Russians that
Sorry?
it was the Russians that freed
Yeah, I mean, we were in the barn. We heard tanks. We looked. They weren't German, we knew that. We didn't know who they were. They were Russians. So we went up to the road. They're like, oh, comrade, blah, 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 blah. And, we were still thirsty because we had the raw chicken, but we did not have any water. And one of these guys had a huge glass of water. It was as big as this. I thought it was water. I was a teetotaler. A teetotaler who had been in prison camp for 2 years, 2 months in non-days, nothing counting. But boy, I could drink water. So I took that glass and I chugged it right down. I went like this. And the Russians just left me there. They just kept trundling on through, leaving the poor sap. Fortunately, some other Russians came back after them, and by that part, I was not feeling good, but I was ambulatory. Yes, sir. Oh, well, mostly to my daughter-in-law's cooking. She is the most amazing chef I've ever known. I've been to more than one restaurant in my day. Some of it's genes. You saw pictures of my dad's and my uncles. They all live very long lives, very healthy, with the only exception of my dad, sadly. But again, teetotaler, don't smoke. I did smoke catalpa beans once in California. You ever know catalpa beans? They're those brown things shaped like a sickle, hanging from trees. They're a really good thing not to smoke. I'll just say that. Never smoked again after that. Yes, sir. Oh, yeah, why did prisoners die so much? Starvation, that was the number one cause. There was so much going on. There was the mental, we had just been through Castron Pass, which was such a disaster, right? It went for the entire week, right? Germans drove us all the way from one side of Tunisia to the other, and they just basically rolled up the second corps. It was so bad that they still teach it in the War College as kind of the worst military disaster of all time. But not to do, exactly. That's why they teach it. So there was that, there was the mental, there was the physical. If your body's in bad shape, you put your cane or whatever, you hit a rock with your foot, should be a little wound, it's gangrenous. Any little thing could be the stone that turns into an avalanche. Sometimes we didn't know, we just knew they weren't there anymore. But we knew we were going to bury them. Military honors. Any others? Yes, sir. Have I been able to forgive what happened to me? Yes and no. As you know, my family was, faith was number one. Jesus talked a lot about forgiveness. On the other hand, what the Germans did, I don't know, Jesus might forgive them, but I know I never could. Unspeakable horrors. As I say, if you haven't seen the Holocaust exhibit, go. My first prison camp, Stalag 7A, was 8 miles from Dachau. So my daughter-in-law and I went there twice, once with my grandkids not too long ago. And the thing that sticks in my mind the most, when we first went there, it hadn't been like museumified, it was still pretty raw. First thing we saw was a pile of shoes. They were as tall as that propeller there. It was about 40 feet in diameter. And you just stare, again, your mind is going, I can't conceive this, I can't take this in. Another room with the suitcases. The mind, just can't get around that. So, yes and no. Others, we have a few minutes left. Oh, all right. Well, thank you so much. Again, thank you. You've been a great audience. Remember, we have a veteran here, World War II veteran, by the ME-103, the Messerschmitt. Of course, the next, if you haven't caught the last tank, or even if you had, That's at 2 o'clock, right? And as I say, if there's any part of the museum you haven't seen, any the military part, it's only a third of it, right? Have you guys seen the car collection over there? And the planes and the race cars?
After 5 or 6 times to do it, I finally saw the taco.
Finally saw the car.
There's so much to see.
After 5,
We never got to try to do this time. We're going to taco.
good idea. Yeah, I mean, I've been here a dozen times. I probably haven't seen half of these pieces of equipment. But yeah, take advantage. If you see any volunteers, please thank them. If you see Hunter, thank him for the amazing amount of work he's put in here to make a lot of this stuff possible. And I just wish you a great day. God bless you.